Welcome to module number 1 of Faith Under Fire. I am Patrick Coffin. I look forward to getting to know all of you as we go in the next 5 nights. It will go rather quickly. I'm going to go for 45 minutes an hour. So we're going to cover, starting Friday, the Eucharist as non-symbol. We're going to talk about Eucharistic miracles, logic, history, and especially the words of our Lord and Savior in John chapter 6, Luke chapter 21, and so on. That's really the sacrament of the sacraments. This is why I've saved it till the end. Night number 4, the 4 Marian dogmas. Night number 3, Sola Scriptura. We can, it'd be funny to do, I'd like to have a book that says where Sola Scriptura is in Scripture, have it like 480 pages, all blank. That'd be good. And then tomorrow night, we're going to talk about the really spiritually dangerous doctrine called once saved, always saved. So tonight, we're going to cover 3 proofs for God's existence. I did a different version of this from my previous course, which was called From Galilee to Rome. We're going to do I think they're the most persuasive. We'll start with what's called way number 5 from Thomas Aquinas, and way number 3, which is the argument from contingency, fancy way of saying dependency, or sometimes it's called existence. And then C.S. Lewis developed an argument with the help of Peter Crave later, called the argument from desire. So welcome. Everyone here, including me, has someone in their life who is an atheist. Maybe they kind of doll it up and say that they're an agnostic, but there are people who believe that there is no God, that the universe explained itself, that religion is a force of evil mostly because it keeps people's minds chained. This is becoming more and more common in pop culture. Someone I think is hilarious, and I've invited him on my show through a 2,000-word invitation, is Ricky Gervais. So people like Ricky Gervais, whose arguments on behalf of atheism are not very strong, are being joined by people like, I forget his name, Jeselnik, Anthony maybe Jeselnik. He's Slavic, raised Catholic, atheist. His humor is very, very, very dark. I just watched him sit down with a Mohammedan imam, and it's very playful in a way he would never ever do with a Catholic priest, say, or a bishop. So atheism is definitely on the rise through social media, through modeling from influential people like starlets and actors and so on. It's almost like the de rigueur thing. It's the expected thing that you're going to be an atheist, because atheism is edgy. So I want to give you some tools that can start a conversation. And it's one of the delicious ironies of the Catholic faith. One of the ironies is that the Catholic faith teaches as a matter of an article of faith in Vatican I. This is the 1870 Vatican I. Remember, everyone knows about Vatican II. Most people don't know anything about Vatican I. It defined all kinds of important things and was interrupted by the Franco-Prussian War in the year 1870. And Dei Filium is one of the doctrines or documents of Vatican I. And it teaches as a matter of faith that you do not need God's revelation to come to morally certain knowledge that God exists. So if you have moral certainty, it means you know. When you walk onto an airplane, you don't have to do deep research into whether or not the pilot is a pilot. You have moral certainty. Same with the surgeon that you submit to. There's all kinds of presuppositions that we have that we know from a morally certain point of view. It becomes a big distraction to start arguing over, is it absolutely true? Do you really, absolutely? Forget 100%. Only heaven is 100%. So we can come to a morally certain knowledge using our mental muscles alone that God exists. So it's a famous line there from Fides et Ratio. That's an encyclical by John Paul II that says, faith and reason are like 2 wings on which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth. So we're going to cover the argument of design, from contingency, and from desire. So the reason it's a little, the numbering might be a little bit confusing, only because when I say the 3rd way or the 5th way, that context is from a Summa Theologiae, which is the great work of Thomas Aquinas, who died in 1274. For my money, the greatest human mind of history. And Thomas had a famous way of teaching in which he begins with the opposite principle, the opposite conclusion that he really wants to subvert and contradict. But he starts with the opposite. So in the case of his argument for God, he begins with, there's no God. It seems there's no God because, and he gives 2 pretty good reasons. Remember, the reasons that Thomas adduces against what he really wants to say are powerful. They're not straw man. They're not like Lane that he can kind of bulldoze over them with his own version of the truth. They're salient. In fact, some of his arguments are better than his own opponent's arguments. So he starts with strong opposition to what he really wants to prove. And the two reasons he gives in the Summa Theologiae are science explains nature, so you don't need God. God is just redundant, just a tautology, sort of, a useless caboose on the end of a train that's doing just nice. Thank you. So the apparent ability of science to prove God, making God irrelevant, sort of like a needless Santa Claus. And second, the existence of suffering and evil. How can a good God permit suffering and evil? And then he answers those two. You can look them up. Where they appear in the Summa will be with the study guide that I'm going to send you tomorrow. So you don't have to madly take notes tonight. And I think it's important because he argues, he says, on the contrary, and he says there are 5 ways you can know. Now, ways 1 and 2 have to do with motion and causality. They're a little bit abstract for most people. There's a lot of Dominican level thinking you have to kind of engage in. Way number 4 has to do with gradations of perfections, which is interesting. I'm going to focus on number 5 first, which is design. I think it's the one that's the most accessible for most people. And then we're going to hit number 3, which is the argument from contingency, which to me is like mind candy. It's super interesting. In fact, I'll often, if I'm reading Thomas, I'll start grinning because of how brilliantly he gets all of this across. So faith is not opposed to reason. One of the people you'll hear me quote a lot in the next 5 nights is Archbishop Fulton Sheen. He died in 1979. He was a priest from the Diocese of Peoria. He went to New York. He ended up getting what's called an agrégé en philosophie from Louvain, back when Louvain was Catholic, kind of a super doctorate. And he wrote over 60 books. I think he was a brilliant and holy bishop who became the auxiliary bishop of New York City. And then in the late 60s until his retirement, he was the Archbishop of Rochester. He had a TV show called Life is Worth Living, for which he won an Emmy. And Bishop Sheen is very, very quotable. In fact, he was close friends with G.K. Chesterton. He sailed to England in 1936 to be at Chesterton's funeral, and he credits Chesterton with a lot of his kind of writing style. So Bishop Sheen would say things like, faith no more destroys reason than a telescope destroys the naked eye. So revelation, what God reveals that you can only know through faith, perfects reason. It takes it to the next level. It allows you to see things that you otherwise couldn't see. For instance, we can never see our guardian angels. We can never see the real presence of Christ in the Eucharist. We can't see the bodily Assumption of Our Lady. So there's a whole preternatural, invisible world that God needs to reveal to us before we can see it. By proof, we're not going for scientific proof in the sense that these proofs or God himself can be put under a microscope and you can test the hypothesis through the scientific method. That's not really what Thomas means by proof. It means a way of arguing based on a simple observation of the world that you can come to a conclusion that there must be a cause behind it. We're going to go into the 4 causes as we go. What he means by cause is the efficient cause, the thing that does the moving and the changing, the invisible force behind the things that are. That's what Thomas means by cause. So I also want to recommend the Thomistic Institute. If you go to Thomistic Institute on YouTube, there's lots of great Dominican philosophers and priests who break things down into a very accessible way. I've learned a lot from the Thomistic Institute. So when we say metaphysical, all metaphysical means is the why behind things. So physical involves matter. Metaphysical is above matter, above the physical world. So science and the scientific method are focused on causes and effects in the things that we can see and observe. But science cannot, one day will eventually, it is impossible for science to answer questions like, why are we here at all? Why did God make the universe? We can point to the Big Bang if we want, but the Big Bang is not the same thing. There's a lot of things that are wrong about the Big Bang, and one of them is the Big Bang is not to be confused with creation from nothing. That is the teaching of the Bible and of the Catholic Church. Creatio et nihilo, creation from nothing. What the Big Bang teaches is that there was some primordial, subatomic thing, this infinitely small point that exploded, and then time and space rushed outward at this absurd rate of speed. That's not the same thing as nothing, because you're starting with a little speck of something. Now, our minds are not able to grasp nothing literally. That's because our minds are dependent on pictures. We can't imagine something that's not a picture, that's not something physical. That's why numbers are notoriously hard to memorize. So, atheism is the supreme exhibition of faith. Faith in nothing, says Bishop Sheen. If you're walking through a forest and you see a painting, let's say, of running horses in a field, or 3 vases of flowers, or a family bedecked in their Sunday best, no one would say, if asked the question, oh, look at this picture with the frame, and I can see the stand, and this, oh, look at the color, I can see the texture of the paint and the quality of the artistry here. Who painted it? Oh, nobody painted it. Paintings bear obvious signs of order that can't be explained by chance. If you and I are walking on the sidewalk and there's 3 quarters next to each other, and you say to me, oh, look at the quarters, I might say, okay, random. If the quarters are lined up almost in a perfect line, 1, 2, 3, I might look at them and say, still probably random. Some things, if they were to fall out, they might land like that. But if the quarters are if they're stacked, or if they're exactly abutting together in a perfect line, that is evidence of design. Everything, the human mind works this way. We want to find out the cause of every effect. That's the basis of the scientific method. Why does this effect happen? How do you explain it? So he noticed that there are things in nature that are not spiritual, they're not intellectual. Think of dandelions. Think of an arrow fired by an archer. Why do arrows hit targets? Why do apple trees every year produce apples? How come acorns turn into oak trees? How does this happen? Well, it can't happen because of randomness. It happens because of evidence of design. We kind of see this all over the place. Acting for an end implies a direction, like an arrow being directed by an archer. Therefore, nature itself points to a supreme intelligence, an intelligent designer, you might say. Now, this is separate from the argument over Darwinism and intelligent design. We're just talking about a mind that is intelligent, that explains the design. Just think of the human eyeball, how infinitely, quasi-infinitely complex the human eyeball is. And each of the proofs at the end, Thomas says, and this is what all men call God. Now, some translations say this is what all men call a God. The reason I don't like that translation, because it implies like a false God. A small God could be a demon. One of the Psalms says, the gods of the nations are idols, but the Lord God, brings new life. But what they mean is, in this case, what Thomas means by a God, even if it's small g, is that this is a small slice of the divine pie. It's not the whole pie. It's not God the Father of Jesus Christ. It's not God the Father who's personal, who counts every hair on your head, who loves you, has a plan for your life. It's not that complex. It's not claiming anything about the nature of God or the attributes of God, as we say. Just that God exists. Just that kind of indispensable minimum. And this being we call God. All right, here's what Thomas is not saying. He's not saying, well, the world's complete and therefore God must have done it. Or this is God of the gaps. The God of the gaps argument is, scientists complain when Christians use this God of the gaps, and they're right. It's a lame way of arguing. Like the lazy version that tries to stick God in whenever science hasn't quite found an explanation. That's not what Thomas is doing here. He's talking about the very order and purpose that's built into the universe. Not this thing or that thing, not how it works from a structural or a functional point of view, but the fact that there's order and purpose built into nature, and that requires an explanation. The regularity of nature, the predictability, whether it's tides or sunsets, or if I drop this, let it go, it's not going to stay there unless I'm performing a magic trick. It's not going to go sideways, it's not going to go up, it's going to go down predictably every single time. That very regularity implies purpose, and purpose implies intelligence. Remember the quarters on the ground? If something's arranged in a very deliberate way, that is a strong argument in behalf of something deliberately being put there. So physics can determine a lot of things, like how the arrow flies through the air, the various laws of aeronautics, and the physics of flight and so on. But Aquinas is asking, why does it know where to go? Why is there any goal directedness built into nature in the first place? Why are things arrayed in such a splendid example, hundreds each day, of causes and effects? So this is the takeaway. The design of the world points to a designer. You can't have a world bearing design with no designer any more than you can have an intricate painting, or even a simple painting, or a song without a songwriter. So every law implies a lawgiver. This is why it's interesting debating with atheists. I had a chance to confront Richard Dawkins in San Diego it's a big, they call themselves secular humanists because it sounds prettier, I guess, or less threatening. And I asked him, I got to the mic first, I'm shy. I asked him why atheists show up and make parodies of Christian faith and they don't, come on shows and debate. And then Dawkins changed the subject, of course. He dodges this way and that. But when someone like Dawkins talks about law, on what basis can he say law without lawgiver? I'm writing a book now called The Little Book of Isms, and I'm doing a Darwinist chapter. And if you're an atheistic Darwinist, you believe that there's a slow march, he calls it up Mount Everest, this slow march of over eons and eons and eons. But even that, even the atheistic account, is all heading in one direction. Even the atheistic materialistic version of Darwinism, the origin of species, is heading in one direction. We're not going scattershot. So even the atheist presupposition contradicts itself. So the universe was not an accident, but had a mind and a love behind it. And that's the kind of insight that can make someone who was originally cynical or completely put off, it might make them think. I've never really seen any rational proof, and Dr. Peter Kraft and Ronald Ticelli have 20 proofs for God in a book. I can just flash the title of it here. It's called the Handbook of Catholic Apologetics, published by Ignatius Press. One of the chapters is on 20 proofs for God's existence. Dr. Kraft, who's a friend and mentor of mine, says that there's one proof in there that I didn't want to include because he only means it half tongue-in-cheek, and that is, the premise is the music of Johann Sebastian Bach exists, therefore God exists. He says that is actually a potent argument. He'll play some Bach in class, and he gets the students to admit the order, the structure, the beauty of Bach's music, whether it's a fugue or a canon, whatever it is, bespeaks something more than just a human mind behind it. Because music comes from the word muse, has a way of circumventing the intellect and really touching the heart. But again, what these proofs do, and we're going to go to contingency in a second, they can jumpstart faith. They can show the human mind that the next step of the obedience of faith in what God reveals through Scripture and tradition is not unreasonable. It's not unreasonable. Most people who stay in the atheistic zone, I've talked to a lot of atheists over the years, there's some behavior they don't want to stop, and they know where the spear is going to land. If they're challenged about their atheism, they know they're going to have to make a change. They're going to have to stop doing something or begin to do something they don't want to do. We're all like this. We all have a fallen human nature that wants to just be as conservative as we can. Small c conservative, meaning conserve energy. So Sheen used to say, don't attend so much to what people say, but why they say it. And sometimes, if it's a wound with their own earthly fathers, this is a famous truth discovered and researched by Dr. Paul Vitz in his book, Faith of the Fatherless, that if you have an absent or abusive father, you are more likely to end up an atheist. That's the psychological cause of atheism, is an abusive or absent father. And the father doesn't have to be a monster, but it's the perception of the son. This is especially true of sons. In his book, he goes through, 15 or so psychohistories of the family of origin of famous atheists, including Dawkins and Bertrand Russell, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, Nietzsche, I think Feuerbach. I mentioned Bertrand Russell. And they all have this one thing in common: an abusive or absent father. So the father is the critical teacher in faith formation. Mothers are important, but that salient father is much more important for faith formation. There is a study from Neuchâtel, Switzerland. This is a government-sponsored study from 1994 that showed if a child brings the message of the gospel to an unchurched home, they begin going to church. I think it's around 13% of the time. And then if the wife has some kind of conversion experience and she brings the message home, then it jumps to about half. Half the time, the whole family will begin to go to church together. And it jumps to over 90% if this happens to the father, and the father brings the message home. This is all God's order. God is a father. Father's not a gender. God doesn't have a body, but his masculine essence is father. In fact, he's father. Think of it. God the Father is father before he's creator. He did not need to create us. He created us out of love. He just has this thing for being. So let's segue now to the argument from contingency. And this is the thing that I find mind candy, super interesting. Here's what Thomas says. If you just look around your own world, you'll discover things that exist and then they stop existing. Things that are, but they need not be. Aquinas calls those contingent beings. They're contingent on something else existing. So an oak tree is dependent on the acorn from which it sprung. Everything we encounter is contingent. Every dandelion, every kitty cat, stars are born, then they collapse. You and I were not here 100 years ago. We're not going to be here 100 years from now. I hope Jesus comes back maybe, Tuesday. I'm not doing much, Lord. Tuesday would be great if you could come back. Here's the argument, though. If everything in the universe is a contingent being that exists but needs not exist, in other words, something that doesn't have to be, if every being in the universe is like this, think of it. At one point in the past, there would be nothing. Let me say that again. If every object, every creature, or every being in the universe potentially could not be because it's contingent, here's a contingent being. This particular copy of the Bible. This King of Hearts. This icon. These are all contingent beings. You're a contingent being. So am I. If your parents had not met, you would not be. If mine had not met, I wouldn't be. And same with their parents and their parents and their parents. Back into history on both sides. If everything in the universe has this quality or this characteristic of not needing to be, then at some point there was nothing. But wait a second. Nothing can't produce something. Maria's saying this in The Sound of Music. Remember that line? Nothing comes from nothing, nothing ever could. She probably had good training in her convent philosophy courses. Nothing can't produce something. Therefore, Thomas argues that there must exist a necessary being that's different not only in degree of the things that exist, but differs in kind. And this, he says, is the only necessary being with a capital B. And this is what all call God. God is the one necessary being. Everything else is contingent on something else existing beforehand. But if everything has that quality, then at one point in the past there'd be nothing. But here we are today. There is something. And the third way argues that this is so because God must. God is the being that can't not exist. No beginning, no end, not limited by time and space. Something, now we know from divine revelation that it's not a something, it's a someone. But let's just stick with the philosophy order now. Something for which the universe owes its existence. And this is what all call God. So here's maybe a helpful analogy. Think of a lamp. A lamp shines only when it's plugged into a power service, right? If you have energy source, then you can plug the lamp in. If you unplug the lamp, and then let's say you disable the currency system around the world, then not only do you have no lamps, you have no any kind of energy. So in the analogy here, God is the invisible energy that didn't just start the world way back when, in the first moment of creation, but sustains the world moment by moment by moment. So all the proofs are not just temporal backwards toward an engine that's moving everything, but down into the depths of the present moment. So I'll show you this in a kind of a strange way. Every second, every moment in the present is impossible unless God sustains it and us. So right now it's the present moment, right? Well, it was then, a second ago. Even when you say the word now, describing the present, when you're saying the ow is in the future. When you get to the ow, the is in the past. The ancients called that the flowing now, the nunc fluens. This is where God is, in the mysterious present moment. And God is the being that is necessary for all other beings to have their being, including you and me. So that's the third way, the argument from contingency. And this is what I'll call God. Therefore, at least one necessary being must exist, the thing that cannot not exist. Okay, so there's the lamp electricity analogy. Now I want to turn to something a little more personal, and this is a very beautiful proof. The German word is Sehnsucht that Peter Kraft uses, and it's developed by C.S. Lewis in, I think it's Surprised by Joy and Mere Christianity. Mere Christianity, by the way, started life as a BBC recording. C.S. Lewis sat down in front of a fire with recording equipment during World War II. And on BBC radio, he gave these lectures, these talks. Well, those talks are recorded now into the book that we call, by its title, Mere Christianity. And the argument goes like this. There are three premises. So a premise is the starting point, the assumption. I'll give you an example of a famous argument with premises and conclusion. Premise number one, the major premise, it's the broadest one. All men are mortal. Yeah, true premise. That's the major premise. Minor premise, premise number two. Socrates is a man. Also true. So let's put them together. What's the conclusion that necessarily follows from the opening two premises? If all men are mortal and Socrates is a man, that means by necessity Socrates is mortal. Now some people, here's a joke version of a syllogism. Frank Sinatra is a sewing machine. How can I prove it? Well, Frank Sinatra is a singer. Minor premise, singer is a kind of sewing machine. Conclusion, Frank Sinatra is a sewing machine. Obviously the problem with that is an equivocation on the word singer. Is it a brand of sewing machine or is it someone who sings songs for a living? So this has given me an idea. I would love to do a class in the future on spotting logical fallacies. I find this really fun and interesting. So the Frank Sinatra being a sewing machine is not going to work. But Socrates being mortal, because all men are mortal, Socrates is a man, it necessarily follows from those premises that Socrates is mortal. So let's apply this to the argument from desire. Here's the major premise. All natural desires are fulfilled on earth. All natural desires are fulfilled on earth. For instance, well, let me linger on this a little bit. By natural desire, I don't mean the desire for a red Ferrari or the desire for a kidney-shaped pool or a second home in Costa Rica. Those are not natural desires. Those are created desires. Those are artificial desires. So every natural desire has a real object that satisfies it. But there's another desire that's deeper and richer than these natural desires. A few examples of natural desire would be hunger. You have a natural desire for hunger. We all do. Well, guess what? There's such a thing as food that satisfies that natural desire. We could multiply them. One thing I thought I added, but you have sexual desire. You have the desire for physical union. Well, guess what? The marital act does exist. There's an opposite sex that can satisfy that rich need, that longing for the two-in-one flesh unity. You are thirsty. Everyone can relate to the natural desire of thirst. Well, guess what? There's such a thing as drink. You are sleepy. You're exhausted. There's such a thing as rest and sleep. You're lonely. There's such a thing as friendship. You get the point. These are all natural desires, and all of them, without exception, are deep in our hearts and our bodies. That's the first premise. The next premise is there's another desire that's deeper than these natural desires. That's the desire for endless love, endless understanding, endless belonging, endless security, endless happiness, endless joy. You can see a little hint of this in if you're at a party and you're having a great time. Let's say it's a wedding party. Sometimes at the height of some really exciting human event, could be a concert, but let's stick with wedding party, this little thought in your mind says, this is going to pass away. As fun as this is not getting at this deeper thing that I have, this deeper, almost like existential loneliness, this reaching out for more, for the fullness of what the present scenario seems to promise. So in the midst of some human satisfaction, could be a feast, could be a drink, I suppose it could be during sex, it could be during a time of communion with someone when you haven't seen them for a long time, it could be like sipping the perfect cup of coffee with your best friend, it could be a moment at a picnic with your family. You realize this has the seed of imperfection because this is not going to last forever. So there's this deeper desire, Sehnsucht is the German word. And what's the premise, conclusion from the premises, I should say? If all natural desires are satisfied in this world, and there's a deeper, more profound desire that's also there that in a way is stronger than these other desires, then the conclusion follows that there must exist a satisfaction to these deeper desires, and this is what we call heaven, or the presence of God. This deeper desire is the one that really counts. This is why you can have an intelligent person, well-read, charismatic, either introvert or extrovert, who will wither under the sting, the torture chamber experience of solitary confinement. We all have this inner existential loneliness that no marriage, no family life, no happy, clappy, no matter what, and I don't mean that in a cynical way, there's no human joy that will last forever. There's a famous movie I really like from Australia. I think it's rated R, but there's nothing sexual in it. It's about 3 interlocking stories. It's based on a play called Speaking in Tongues, directed by Andrew Beauvais, and it stars Barbara Hershey, Anthony LaPaglia, and Jeffrey Rush. And it's a pro-monogamy film through the lens of adultery. And one character says to the other about marriage, love isn't enough. Yeah, it isn't. So that's the argument from desire. All natural desires are fulfilled on earth. There exists in us a deep supernatural desire for something beyond the earth. Therefore, that deeper desire must exist as a satisfaction in a way that's not limited to time and space, not limited to life on Earth. A few objections to these. Hey, doesn't science explain everything? Well, science explains how things work, not why, and not why they're here at all. Science cannot go near the question of creation. It's impossible. Creation is a metaphysical question because it implies creator. And creator is by definition invisible, can't be put under a microscope, can't be directly observed, has to be by inference. This is why Thomas Aquinas teaches that God's existence is not self-evident. It's not like, oh, look at the rabbit on the table, therefore God exists. No. Think of the way Jesus talks to us about seeking the kingdom of God, right? Seek ye first the kingdom of heaven, and all these things shall be added unto you. You have to seek. The Lord loves to be sought by us. He asks us to knock and to seek. We have to look. He doesn't barge in with the doors, you know, he doesn't kick the doors in with guns blazing like heavenly Yosemite Sam. It says, behold, in the book of Revelation, I stand outside the door and knock. Whoever lets me in, I'll come in and sup with him. A little sideways reference to the Eucharist. I will knock. The door of our hearts is designed with the handle on the inside. But God gives enough evidence that you can reason through, whether it's from the contingent things in the world, whether it's from the unbelievable array of evidence of design, or whether it's the evidence of your natural desires, pointing to a fulfillment that we can't even ask or imagine. This is why the concept of heaven is one of my favorite things to talk about, because the scripture is almost silent about heaven. The only physical metaphor we have from Christ is wedding feast, which is great as far as it goes. Wedding feasts, by definition, are happy, they're joyous, there's a raucous party, you're celebrating two in one flesh, you're congratulating the couple on their adventure of parenthood and kind of the life of the future. And that's all amazing. But that's the end of it. This is why St. Paul in the letter to Romans can say, eye has not seen, nor has ear heard, nor has it ever entered into the heart of man what God has in store for those who love him. In other words, it's going to be so far beyond what we could ask or imagine. Remember Romans 8:28? I remember Charlie Kirk was asked this, and before he asked it, I thought he's going to go Romans 8:28, and he did. And the first word is the most important. The first word is not most, and it's not some. It's all. All things work together for good for those who love God and are called to his purposes. So, who made God? You may have heard this objection. This is every sixth grader's favorite objection. Oh yeah? Well, who made God? That presumes that God is just one more being. Like God is either a wish projection of mankind, or even the way we talk about God as the supreme being. God is the supreme being. That's a pretty good definition of God. But supreme being has to be capital S, capital B, because what it points to, the concept supreme being, points to the origin of all being, the source of all being. And that is essentially mysterious because we're created beings. We're small b beings. This is it's easier to point out in writing, but I'll give it a shot, just orally here. There's a famous book by Robert Farrar Capon. It was famous when I was in university. It's called The Third Peacock. It's on creation. It's a pretty interesting book. He was a teacher of Greek and a Episcopalian clergy with 6 kids. And he suggests that we need a better verb for is. God is. That's the name that God gives Moses, right? In the 3rd chapter of the book of Exodus. The burning bush figure is telling Moses, look, you're going to get escape. You're going to get escape and liberation from Egypt. The Hebrews are going to be released, and it's going to be amazing. Now, Moses has no idea how to take the next step. So he starts with, who should I say sent me? And the voice says, I am who am. Tell Pharaoh I am sent you. That is the divine name. Not I have been, not I will be. I am who am. In other words, amness isness. You see how divine revelation lines up with what Thomas Aquinas talks about? God as the being, the only necessary being, the prime mover, the uncaused cause, the designer, the invisible, eternal source of everything. So Capon, Robert Farrar Capon, suggests the word bees. In other words, be, not buzz buzz, but B-E-S. Not only is God is, which sounds a little static, God bees. His isness is dynamic. It's always dropping hints to us, whether it's a sunrise, whether it's a charming squirrel working on a nut, whether it's the sound of a Bach cantata, or the music of Joe Hisaishi, or Johann Sebastian Bach, or a rapturous kiss with your best friend, husband, wife, whatever it is. God is always dropping hints about himself and about the things that he has in store for us. And that's one reason why I love being Catholic, is this sense of balance. We have the both and. I'm sure the both and is going to come into our discussions tonight and the other modules of Faith Under Fire. So God is the being that is above the need for being created. God is, capital I, is. No beginning, no end, just a rapturous, eternal now. Now at this point you might be thinking, isn't heaven going to be boring with this God we can know, morally speaking, about his existence through reason, and then we have all this information that God reveals to us through Scripture and sacred tradition? Isn't heaven going to be boring? Like, yay, Jesus, we love you, we honor you and the saints and the angels. And then what? What about next Tuesday? Oh, more praising. We're going to, I don't know, both handers will be charismatic renewal, and then we'll have a few centuries of, I don't know, quiet trad Lectio Divina. What are you talking here? Eventually, have you ever thought this, that heaven eventually is going to become dull? I mean, it's like forever. No offense, Lord, but this is it? The lack of the fires of hell? That error is a mental error, because the error of heaven as eventually boring is premised on projecting our current experience of time up into heaven, before, during, after. Remember earlier I said when you're saying the word now, the n is in the past when you get to the ow, and the ow is in the future when you're beginning the n. But heaven's not going to be like that. If this is an experience, think of a let's say a shoelace, and it's from here to here. This is before, during, after, past, present, future. But heaven's more like this. Like all of our existence enjoyed by God supremely forever in a way that will never be boring, because it's infinite by definition. There's always going to be more aspects of eternity to chew on, starting with the mystery of God making us out of nothing. And I'll end here, and we can turn to some questions. Augustine said that God made you without you, but he won't redeem you without you. I like to say, God loves you and there's nothing you can do about it. God made us without our permission, but he will not save us through his Son, Jesus Christ, without our permission. That's something we have to cooperate with. And this is why the Lord loves to be sought. This is why there's seeking and knocking and searching. And that's why the existence of God is not self-evident, but can be arrived at using the light of natural reason, the fact that there's order in the universe, the fact that you can't have a universe full of contingent dependent beings. There must be a necessary being on which every other being is dependent securely, and the fact that each natural desire is fulfilled, which points to a deeper heavenly fulfillment of that deeper, almost supernatural desire we all have. So Bishop Sheen says, if there were no God, there'd be no atheists. Think of it. What are atheists atheating? How could you have no anti-cigarette laws if there's no such thing as cigarettes? How can you have prohibition if wine and spirits don't exist? That's another kind of folly, logical folly of atheism. What are atheists atheating? So reason opens the door and allows grace to flood in. And with that, I'm going to turn now to your fine questions.
Could I ask a quick one?
Yeah, is that Richard?
Yep, it's Richard.
Hey, Ricardo. Excellent, sir.
So if you ever get to talk to a committed atheist and you bring up their any of these arguments, any one you want to pick, which are quite convincing to me, what's the typical pushback consist of? I mean, like, go jump in a lake, or I got to take a bath, or what? I mean, how do you get around these airtight arguments in your experience?
A good question. There's a bunch of different ways that atheists dodge the question. One of them is they don't accept your definition of God. They want to think of God the way all of their atheist friends have, and they get this from Richard Dawkins, that God is the flying spaghetti monster, that God is like no different from a unicorn with bright, sparkly eyes. Doesn't exist. We say it does. This is what Ricky Gervais says in interviews, and this is why I would love to have him on my podcast. I'm such a huge Ricky Gervais fan. I think he's like an outsider insider in so many ways. He's a teacher of prophetic truth to power. But Ricky, when this comes up in interviews, he'll say, well, you've got Zeus, you've got Jupiter, you've got Mars, you've got all the Hindu gods. Why do you need this Christian God? Well, that is a intellectual category error. God, the God of the universe, the one true God that made everything out of nothing, is not one more small g God. God has no parts. God is composed of no material. God has no gender. God doesn't have a body. God is pure spirit, the source of everything. And that's, we're talking about a lot of propaganda that now, because of social media, is buttressed 24/7. You go into Reddit, you're going to go into the subreddit groups of atheists. Some atheists are into Wicca, which is funny because a lot of atheists, they'll say they believe in the devil, but they don't believe in God. When I was at that secular humanist conference in San Diego, ostensibly they were atheists, but there was a lot of satanic looking, especially girls, like super goth, a lot of kind of dark, strange. The whole affect of them was strange, almost like they could be the love children of Anton LaVey, Sandoz, the Sandoz, Sandoz, the father of the Satanic Church. So there's a certain overlap between Wicca, New Age, occultism, and atheism. So they're fine with the devil. They just don't accept the one true God that made the devil. And this is another confusion, Richard. I'm really glad you brought this up. And this taps into a very common presupposition that is wrong, and that is that God and the devil are about the same. You got God on one side of the coin, you got the devil on the other side of the coin. Who's going to win the coin toss of the universe? It's not true. The gap between Satan and God is infinite. Satan's a creature. All the demons are creatures. So it's asymmetrical warfare. God permits Satan to do all kinds of things. That doesn't mean he wills it, and it doesn't mean that they're somehow on equal arm wrestling footage, so to speak. Footage, armage. The other thing that an atheist will do when you're making some headway, if they raise something that they can't refute directly, they'll say, "Oh, then it's true for you." Subjectivism. They'll just slip into subjectivist relativism. Well, you got your God, you got your religion, and I have my truth. So you have your truth over there, I have my truth over here. That's a way to deflect away from the force of this argument. Because if God exists, that has implications for them, for their lives, their choices, their behavior. And I was a practicing agnostic. I lost my Catholic faith in university, at a Catholic university, Mount St. Vincent, founded after a great saint, Vincent de Paul. And I didn't want to hear the arguments because I wanted to live the way I wanted to live. It's another wonderful quote by Bishop Sheen, that if you basically careful what you believe, because people live according to what they believe. Your belief is like the governor. It's like the steering wheel of your life, of your soul, of the decisions you make, what you believe. And the word believe, the Middle English origin of belief is Belioff, which is the same word for beloved. So what you love conditions what you do. Amor pondus meum, wonderful 3 Latin phrase from St. Augustine. Amor pondus meum, love is my weight, W-E-I-G-H-T. So depending on what you love, that's going to condition how you behave. If you love the God of the universe, the one true God, and you give your life to his only begotten Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, that's going to produce holiness if you do that. If you love crystal meth, if you love sexual sin, if you love gossip, if you love materialism, then that's going to be your weight, and that's going to produce a whole different set of choices and behaviors. If you believe that God is a father, that's going to produce a different culture and a different sort of a different default setting of your life and your behavior, compared to if you believe God is called Allah and is a master who has no children, only slaves. That's going to produce a different culture. This is why I always say this. Andrew Breitbart famously said that politics is downstream from culture. I say culture is downstream from religion. The word culture comes from cultus. It's a Latin word for worship. And what is our culture worship now? Money, sex, and power. Those are the triple false gods: money, sex, and power. What does the gospel offer? The exact contradiction and fulfillment of the 3 false gods. Instead of money, sex, and power, the gospel without compromise offers poverty, chastity, and obedience. It's the relinquishment of the false gods. And what you get is what you've always wanted, which is the true standard of real love. This is why Paul VI was vindicated as a prophet when he wrote Humanae Vitae, the encyclical condemning contraception back in 1968. He said, love is human, it's fecund, it's faithful, and it's total. It's all those things. And we're made for it. We're made for true love. We're made for the gospel without compromise. We're not made to make compromises. You know, this is why when I say at the end of my podcast, be a saint, what else is there? That just popped out of my mouth in my first week back in Catholic Answers Live. And it's based on a line I heard from the French poet Léon Blois. Léon Blois said, at the end of life, there's only one tragedy, and that is to have been a saint. So, Richard, I hope that helps. I guess you could say there's as many objections and question dodging as there are atheists, but those are the 2 main ones. That they want a redefinition. They want a redefinition of God, so they don't have to think about God, the supreme being, who's invisible and is above the need to be created, or they don't want to change something about their lives, and so they just change the subject, or they slip into relativism. True for you. I call it the Satanic Four. True for you. Now, why? One last point. We'll go into a different question. Why is relativism really easy to refute? Because it refutes itself. If something is true only for you, that means there's no such thing as absolute truth. And at this point, most agnostics who are relativists will agree, yeah, there's no absolute truth. Are you absolutely sure? Is it absolutely true that there's no absolute truth? So at that point, they've hoisted themselves on their own petards, which is a wonderful moment because you don't have to do anything. You just have to see them connect those dots in their minds. Great question, Richard. I see Brent. You can go next, Brent. You're next in the camera line.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can, Brent. Welcome.
Thank you so much. Thank you. You mentioned social media, and
Yep,
I'd like your thoughts on that. Is it even worth engaging with, even let's say on one of your YouTube videos, and somebody in there is an atheist, in this case, for this particular class? Is it even worth engaging them with proofs and things that we're learning, that we're confident in? What are your thoughts in general around commenting on those things? Because I find that opportunity is more prevalent, because I don't do a lot of big social things. I'm going to run into atheists, but more if it's someone in those. So I just like your thoughts and tips on that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. I just put on the Twitter today. Twitter is a anxiety, concern, worry, conflict creating machine. If Twitter stopped existing tonight at midnight, would tomorrow and all our tomorrows be better? I don't know the answer. I find social media like Instagram or Twitter, Snapchat, that kind of thing, that's mostly text-based, I mean, you can have videos. But if it's people like tweeting back and forth, what do you call it? And is it called Xing? I just can't call it X. Let's just go with tweeting for now. That is very prone to backfiring when you're sharing the faith, because it's discarnate. You're not in the same room. We've all had this happen to us with friends or family members, right? You text something, hey, are you coming on Monday? And the person goes, what's that supposed to mean? Because the text state that you're insinuating some tone, or like you're making them feel stupid. So texting and tweeting are notoriously tone deaf. I can think of no examples where anything I've ever said, no matter how patiently, no matter how gently I've ever said on Twitter, has ever converted anybody. Even when I was hosting Catholic Answers Live, and even on my own podcast, all I'm doing is just doing as kind as I can replies 10,000 times. I'm just planting seed after seed after seed after seed. And hopefully the cumulative effect of this patient kind replies will work. But if it's, I call them FNCs. If it's an FNC, a fake name coward, I will not engage. I'll just say, hey, I'll block FNCs with a smile, block. Because I'm out here in the open. Brent, if you're using your own name, you have accountability. You're in the open. That's all I ask. However, it can happen on a live stream or during a YouTube video that I or someone else says something. And if someone is open to the truth of what I'm saying, I will reply in the comments section, as long as it doesn't become an argument thread. Because on social media, everything is done in a fishbowl. So, and I'm conscious of this. I'm preaching to myself here. When you answer on Twitter or in the comment section of any media platform, let's say YouTube for example, you're aware that someone's going to love your John Wayne answer. I showed that Protestant heretic, or that stupid atheist, or that, gay activist freakazoid, whatever. And it becomes clicks and likes. You kind of get gratified by people applauding how brutal your reply was. That is a complete pastoral backfire. It's called winning the argument when we should be winning the soul. I do not claim to be a good example of this, but there's someone on this in this course, and she said it publicly, so I can mention Lisa from the UK. Lisa months ago was a atheist. She had been into strange witchcraft stuff. If you want to weigh in, Lisa, if you have a question, I'd love to hear from you. An amazing story, and here she is. She's looking to get on the track toward baptism, and that's because I was on a live stream with Matthew Marsden, a UK actor and singer and wonderful family man. He's got 8 absurdly good-looking kids. He's pro-life and has really paid the cost of being a Catholic in Hollywood. And something we said, I don't even remember what it was, but that's an example of something that was spoken and observed by a third party, and something about the grace of God clicked. I had nothing to do with it, and I know Matthew would say the same thing, but some combination of words, some experience that I shared, you never know how something that's just like a sip of tea for you, or just a kind of casual comment, can really land on someone who needs to hear it. And that's God. God wants us to be fishers of men. And therefore, if you extend that fisherman metaphor, our job is not to be debate champions. It's not to rack up, PhDs in theology. It's to be the most juicy, iridescent worms that we can, so we can attract people. We can hook them for Christ and bring them onto the ship where it's safe and secure, nestled in the bark of Peter. That was way more poetic than I intended. I hope that makes sense. Yeah, great question, Brent. Thank you so much. All right.
Who's the other person?
Yes. Hello. Is this Mary? No.
Mary
no.
Miller.
Hey, Mary.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Hello.
Glad you're
Yeah.
here. Hey.
Have you ever heard people say the appearance of order is really because there are multi-universes, and you just happen to live in the universe where the quarters are happen to be in order, and so it's really just the appearance of order and design, but not
Yes.
actually.
Yes. That's your question?
I think is that
No, it is. That's an objection.
possibility maybe, but
Yeah, you hear this a lot from people who are self-styled physicists or physicist wannabes, and they often will entangle what they're saying with what's called string theory, or the possible, I've heard 10 to the power of 16, I don't know where they get these numbers. There could be up to 10 to the power of 16 multiverses in which other universes exist. They have totally different rules, and therefore what we call order and cause effect in this universe may have no application in another universe. Is that the gist of what you're of the objection?
I think it's just a way to get around the appearance of order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing multiverse lacks is any existence, any proof of its existence. Has a lot going for it, like UFOs. I feel like I'm an honorary Missourian. Show me, show me the show me state. Show me. There's no evidence whatsoever of multiverses.
Well, I
And
think
so-
that the general feeling that science has proven more than it actually has. The idea that, there is evidence for this, you just don't know enough physics to recognize or to understand it. And I
Yeah.
don't know how to.
Yeah, sometimes there's a book by Anthony Rizzo, Rizzo, and he's a physicist who writes for children. So if you look up Anthony Rizzo physics books, pretty interesting stuff. And he breaks it down. The fundamentals of physics are actually quite simple, but they get loaded with a lot of jargon like quantum mechanics and the Heisenberg principle, and then you get kind of time bendy weirdness that's not of practical value, and except to distract people with sounding what Flannery O'Connor calls intellectual. She spelled it INNERLEKSHUL, intellectual. But there's no evidence at all that there's any other universe besides this one, and this is the only one we can observe. And we certainly observe an amazing array of examples of design, and the principles in the first three ways, way number 1, 2, and 3. In other words, mover, uncaused cause, and necessary being. Those are principles that are valid anywhere. Just like the principle of non-contradiction. Have you guys heard of the principle of non-contradiction?
Be true and false at the same time.
Yeah, something cannot be and yet not be at the same time under the same aspect. That's true on the planet Zorkon. That's true in anywhere in a imagined universe. Certainly in the one that we have now, it's true in any location, any time. So this transcends time and space. You can't both be and not be at the same time under the same conditions. So a cranberry cannot be a goat. A strawberry cannot be Pele, the soccer player. God can't be Satan. I can't be you. That's the principle of non-contradiction. And that's something abstract, but it's something that's true and valid for all times and places. So I'm always wary of jargon terms like quantum mechanics and multiverse, instead of breaking it down to where most people live. I forget who said this. I learned this at Franciscan University in a philosophy class by Dr. Joseph Seifert. He said, he's quoting another philosopher, I wish I could remember who that was. He said, if you can't distill your philosophy so an 8-year-old understands it, it's worthless.
We don't really understand.
Yeah. Thank you, Mary. Glad you're there. Okay, cooking with glass. Next up. Hey, Jane.
You're
Hey.
muted.
Yeah, I think you're muted, Jane. You want to try again?
Sorry.
Yeah.
So, this whole proving that God exists, which I just loved it. And how do you refute the this whole thing that's going on about UFOs, aliens, saying that, did God create them? Are they from someone else? How do you have an argument about that? Or not, and you know what I mean, an argument.
Mm-hmm. Good question, Jane. I've pondered a lot about this. Have you heard of Project Bluebeam?
Just in passing, yeah.
Okay, you can all look up Project Bluebeam. Remember, I regard my opinion as worthless, so don't believe anything I say. But I want you guys to do your own research. Project Bluebeam is a military plan to fake an alien invasion. President Ronald Reagan stood up in April 1988 in front of the General Assembly of the United Nations and dropped a weird, you can watch it on Vimeo, I don't know if it's on YouTube. He dropped, in the context of world peace, a strange reference to aliens from another world attacking us. And I don't know what, I like to stick close to the evidence that I can prove. So I like to hew closely to what is provable. So a lot of what I'm saying now is speculative. I can say since before World War II, we've been subject to a fairly consistent slow drip psychological operation. Short form for that is PSYOP. And to me, it got off the ground in a very powerful way in 1938 with the Mercury Theater, led by a young actor named Orson Welles. They produced a play on radio called War of the Worlds, based on the, what's the other guy, the other Orson? H.G. Wells radio play. And that's about an alien invasion. So when they did this on the East Coast over the radio, live, it was so realistic because Orson Welles is a complete genius. This presentation of the news saying, man, we're being attacked by aliens. Untold hundreds of thousands of people, maybe more on the East Coast, thought it was real. And so phone lines to emergency services and the government and firefighters and law enforcement were lit up because they thought it was real. Then you have a lot of the episodes of The Twilight Zone by Rod Serling. Then you had Star Lost. Then you had Star Trek. Then you have Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Then you had Contact starring Jodie Foster. I'm just off the top of my head. So the idea of us being kind of contacted, did I mention Close Encounters of the same? Yeah, E.T. The idea that there's something else out there just became part of the warp and woof of a lot of novels, but mostly TV and movies. There's no evidence of any of it. Ask yourself why so many people from diverse areas are all talking about the same thing. Ex-President Obama is talking about this. It's alleged that there's biologics. There's no proof. It's like, where's the second universe? Where is the Loch Ness Monster? I'm open to there being a Loch Ness Monster. I'm not anti anything, but I like evidence. And so my goal as a teacher of the Catholic faith is to encourage people to live their lives like a juror. You're always being presented with evidence, and you have to be aware of it, you have to understand it, and then you have to make a decision on it. And everyone has their own criterion of what true and false means. And this is where discernment comes in. I don't know what the PSYOP is distracting us from. I just know that I always cringe when I hear Catholics giving credence to it, saying, oh, well, you know what, it's really just demons. No, stop accepting the first premise that they even exist. I was driving, I'll give you one quick anecdote. I was driving in Southern California 5 or 6 years ago, and off over the ocean, low, like the lower, say, 1/4 of the sky, began to be lit up by this really strange, eerie series of bright lights and dark objects passing in front of each other. I can't even put it into words. Everyone on the highway was pulled over to watch this thing. And it was like colorful. It was like aurora. I've seen aurora borealis growing up in Canada. It wasn't that. It was artificial and strange, and it vanished quickly. It didn't slowly fade away, just there and then it's gone. Now the official story was, because I looked it up, what's going on over the the coast of Orange County, California? Oh, there was an Elon Musk SpaceX that exploded after it took off from Vandenberg Air Force Base. Vandenberg Air Force Base is a 4-hour drive from where I was. That was low over the water. There's no way that was it. And that got me thinking about Operation Project Bluebeam. So again, I don't see any evidence. And as long as I'm an honorary Missourian, I have to go to my fallback position of waiting for evidence that hasn't quite been presented. Does that help?
So to someone who says there are, we're being visited, to argue that is to just say, show me the evidence.
Yep. Yes.
Okay.
And as you know, we're slowly being built around us is what Dr. Doug Haugen calls a simulacrum. It started with, you could say it started with the wireless. The wireless radio is the most profound invention in human history for communications. It's not the printing press, it's not the wheel, it's not fire. the invention of the wireless by Guglielmo Marconi, the Catholic teenager, total genius, changed everything about the way we communicate, because the wireless radio made everything, the wireless radio made place irrelevant for the first time in history. Now, you don't need to be within, like, reading distance from a book. You don't have to be within earshot of a speaker speaking through microphones. With radio, there's simultaneity was available for the first time. And this is why Marshall McLuhan was able to predict the internet back in 1962 in his book, The Gutenberg Galaxy. And with AI and with deepfakes, it's really hard to evaluate what is accurate and what is not. What is Tyler Robinson? What is this prime minister doing that? What I can't tell AI, like really high-end AI. It gets past me. I'm completely fooled by it. And so this becomes a crisis of evidence. When our old standbys, CBS, ABC, NBC, that's gone. They're dinosaurs. We don't have Walter Cronkite telling us things anymore. The good news is we have a digital revolution, and everyone who has access to a modem has access to the truth. The bad news is you're killed with choices. So discernment becomes very important. But I stand on and insist on evidence. And there's some things you could actually, ironically, you could ask ChatGPT, what are the signs of AI video? Because often they'll give themselves away. There'll be a glitch, or there'll be like a photo of someone when they've got 6 fingers. Sometimes AI is not perfect. And just while I'm on this, AI is literally a contradiction in terms. There's no such thing as artificial intelligence. No. That's another part of our predictive programming. This came from a Steven Spielberg movie from the early 90s called AI, starring Haley Joel Osment. Not a very good movie. But what AI does, like ChatGPT and so on, it collects and collates information at such breakneck speed. The sheer speed of its ability to cobble together things and put them in one place gives the appearance of like it's learning, like it has the first person singular, like it's like a soul. No, it isn't. The model can never exceed the modeler. So, yeah, evidence, please. There's a good t-shirt idea. Evidence, please. Thank you, Jane. I hope that's a help. All right, up in the queue. Is that Dorothy? Dorothy Duke.
Yes, hi, Patrick.
Hi, Dorothy. Hey, welcome.
Thank you. I think my question relates somewhat to what you said about Lisa from the UK suddenly, seeing the light.
Yep.
You were saying how God insists on us pursuing Him,
Mhm.
us seeking Him. He won't force Himself on us.
Yes. Now,
Or-
yes. Can I make one caveat?
Yeah,
Sometimes because he's God and he's not bound by any set of rules, whether by me or anyone else, sometimes he can do it like a sovereign showing up, as he did with Saul of Tarsus.
I was just going to say like St. Paul.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Yeah, that's a very good corrective addition. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not like, oh God, he's the secret agent man, and we'll know nothing unless we're like knocking like the woman trying to get the attention of the unjust judge. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sometimes
but
God
it doesn't seem like that happens all that much. It happened to
Right.
St. Paul and all, but I find myself worrying a lot about people who haven't had exposure to Christianity or Catholicism. I grew up in parochial school,
Yep.
in Northern California. None of my friends, none of my best friends had any of that type of exposure,
Mhm.
and to this day, they think Christianity is a myth. Catholicism is a myth. They think what's important is to be a good, loving person.
Yep.
And if there's something up there, it'll be beautiful. They think hell is ridiculous, this kind of stuff. And I wonder sometimes, it just seems so unfair. I feel like, how did I get so lucky to, be raised as a Catholic? And I left the church for decades, but
Yep.
I had that and it pulled me back. And I just worry, how much does God reach out to these people that could have been me? I could have been the one that went to the public school instead of so I feel so lucky, and I worry about all my childhood friends because
Yep. Mhm.
they still don't see it.
Yeah. There, but for the grace of God, go I.
Yeah.
The difference between me and Hitler, me and Stalin, me and Jeffrey Dahmer is time, contingency, and background. We have
Yeah.
to keep that in mind, that our faith is a precious gift and we can lose it. Yeah, I hope it's a consolation to remember that God always gives enough grace for everyone. If you live in Papua New Guinea and you never hear the gospel at all, you still have this law written on your heart called conscience. That's another thing that can't not. Conscience can't not. It's the thing we can't not know. So even someone, they may
Yeah.
claim to be an atheist, but they do have a moral code. Like no atheist is going to give up a seat on a bus. Or if an atheist is about to sit down on a bus and some jackball guy quickly sits down and looks up and grins, they're not going to say, oh, you know what, it doesn't really matter, there's no God after all. No, it's obviously not fair that you took my seat because you saw me angling for the seat. So
Yeah.
atheism looks good on paper, but it breaks down in practice. No atheist lives as though there's no God. They want to be nice to puppies. Ricky Gervais loves dogs. You know what I mean? Why?
Right.
Why do you love dogs? If there's no God to whom you are responsible or accountable at the end, why can't you bash your neighbor's head in with a bat?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
See?
You know what, good and evil somehow, even if right and wrong somewhere a little bit. You can cover it up
Yeah.
a lot when
Yes.
you're living a life without, church
Well,
or God
well
or
put.
anything.
Well
Yeah.
put. I think we have to, back to what I said earlier about the Catholic faith having so much balance. We have to balance, kind of go the middle between two extremes. One extreme would be they don't know about baptism, they're going to hell. Jesus is clear, without baptism, outside the church, there's no salvation. That's one extreme, because it presumes that we know what God's able to do. The other extreme is, oh, they're probably just fine. After all, their formation, who knew, their moral upbringing is so bad that it's basically invincible ignorance. That's not true either. If you grew up among thieves, you know what happens if someone steals from you, right?
Yeah.
Because of conscience, what we can't not know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Prayer and more prayer.
Right.
And
Thank you.
yeah, thank you. I love keeping this in mind, that the Lord wants sinners with him again more than I do. It's not, I can't take it all on me.
Yeah.
And he's always at work. Jesus says that God is always at work. He's on the clock. He's on the air. To use a radio metaphor, the Holy Spirit's
Yes.
on the air.
So just keep praying and praying, even for a
Yeah, God.
lifetime. If you have that feeling that God has this person in your path, that's what I feel like. These people, I feel a responsibility to them. I
Mhm.
guess if nothing seems to be happening, I can still keep praying, and that is never going to be a waste.
Yeah, no prayers wasted. Yeah, that's good.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thanks for that.
Mhm.
All right, awesome. Thank you. I can put on my eyeballs here. By the way, all of this is going to be recorded, so if you have to bug out or leave early, that's fine. You'll get the study
Okay.
guide and the video of
Right.
both. So, but we can keep her up. Thank you very much, Dorothy. Thank you,
Mhm.
Jane. Thank you, Brent. Thank you, Richard. Who else? Danuta and Jennifer, the noted Dr. Jennifer Turgeon, Judy Sachs, Lisa, actually Teresa Sando, Mike Berry, Mike Rogan. There's Richard there. So maybe we'll take one or two. If you're there, Teresa Sando or Lisa, if you want to fire away, you'd be most welcome. Or Jennifer.
Hello, Patrick.
Hey, Lisa, the famous Lisa Perch.
Yeah.
Hey.
Hello, everybody. Just to let everybody know, never give up praying for anyone who's following the occult. When I was in Matthew Marston's room, people were praying the rosary for me to be coming closer to God. And don't think God wasn't chasing me, he was. Matthew had been challenging me for weeks on what he was saying on the mic and in the room. Never give up in the rosary for people. It does work. Otherwise, I won't be here today.
Mm-hmm.
I thank God for what they did. So never give up.
That's
Um,
gorgeous, Lisa. I didn't know that you had been going back and forth with Matthew. I didn't know that there was some prior seed planting going on. Oftentimes, we come in, we think we're at the beginning of someone's story, but we're always coming to the middle of their story. We don't know the preceding chapters. It's beautiful. It's almost like God is real. I like to think of God as the screenwriter of history. He's writing. He's got characters, and we're the characters, and we're free, even though he knows the ending, because he knows all things. He doesn't force our choices. He doesn't force us to do the things tomorrow that we will do, but he foreknows them because his way of knowing is not stuck in time. Maybe this is the time to just hit that, because it can also be an objection that if God knows things beforehand, then he's just a nasty bank manager with nice PR department. Really, he's forcing you to do things if he knows beforehand, whether it's to lose a hockey game or be abandoned or have some horrible calamity. But God's knowledge of the future is, I think, best understood the way you and I would if we were standing on the top of a building at the corner of an intersection. We can see the traffic flow down below us. If we saw two trucks that were barreling, speeding, and let's say the lights are out and they're not going to stop, at some point, you're going to see those trucks converge, and they are going to hit. Even if they hit the brakes, there's too much forward momentum on these two large vehicles. You can legitimately say, I know beforehand what's going to happen. They're going to collide. But that knowledge doesn't cause the drivers to crash. Make sense?
Yeah.
If you're a teacher and you see Junior is slacking off and he's a terrible student and he gets things in late and he's failed all the tests, and then the final exam is only worth 20%, or let's say 30%, you know, actuarially speaking, he can't pass. You know beforehand he's going to fail. Not because you have magical future reading powers, but because the evidence points in one direction, and you can foreknow it without causing the thing that happens. Make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. Roger. All right, maybe one more. Una más, as they say in Espanol. Well, good. It was all perfectly clear. Fantastic. Tonight, we're gonna create an animated intro at the top, which will be emailed to you tomorrow, along with the study guide that has all the Bible verses and examples from the writing of Thomas Aquinas, and everything you need for future study. And I want to thank everyone. This has been a really fun module number 1. Tomorrow, bring your questions about once saved, always saved. This is a really rich, meaty topic, because it slides into another topic called blessed assurance. It's kind of hard to talk about once saved, always saved without talking about blessed assurance. And all of it contradicts itself. You do not need advanced theological training or being a Bible scholar to see through the once saved, always saved heresy. No one believed it before John Calvin. It doesn't exist anywhere in the church fathers. It's purely an example of the Protestant revolt that happened in the mid 16th century. So thank you so much. I hope these 3 proofs were a help. You can rewatch the recording whenever you want to, and really appreciate all your questions. So God bless and be well. I'll see you mañana, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, and whatever. I think you're 9 hours ahead, Lisa, in Merry England, something like that.
It's about 1 o'clock in the morning here.
Oh, look at you! Oh, so someone gets the committed award. Cool. All right. God bless you well. We'll see you tomorrow night. Peace. Be a saint. What else is there?